from DynastyLeagueFootball.com and the Deal Family of podcasts. We are live on the Super Show, and we've got JMic, we've got Zac Reed, the tacit assassin himself. We'd all be dummies if it wasn't for the Dynasty Dummies. And of course, that's Tommy B. I'm the SFD. This is a Superflex Super Show. So here we go. Tommy, what should we talk about?
Oh, I don't know, John. What do you think, man? We've got the Dynasty Dummies finally after a bit of a scheduling issue. Entirely my fault. Sorry, gentlemen. But we're post-rookie draft. I think we've done a little bit of rookie content. I think it's time that we not only talk about rookies, but we talk about the interplay right now. The ADP that is starting to form and what it is we see that is going well in rookie drafts, and maybe where the talent evaluations, where the draft capital, and where the early formation of this ADP isn't aligning, and what we can teach the SuperFriends, what we can learn ourselves tonight, so that we can all grow and be more accurate in the drafts that we're going through right now. Because I've got a bunch that are kicking off or underway, and unfortunately, I'm up against these two gentlemen, JMic and Zac Reed, in a couple of leagues, and they've worked me over, John. I need some help, man.
So you go to them for help. I like that. That's a good strategy, actually.
They've already taken their pound of flesh. It's time, gentlemen.
You know exactly what I'm going to do in the rookie draft. I've been talking about this for 8 weeks now. And if you wanted to have, the 1 through 15 or 1 through 30, it's readily available. You know what's going to happen. I play the way I preach. When we talk about these rookies but it's so much fun to me to finally have. We talk about this a lot, where it's such a marathon. So we started looking at rookies back in September, October, November, and finally finished up doing the hoot nanny a couple weeks before the draft. And then you have the draft, which is all of the information that we didn't have, which was most of it. Like there's so much information we don't have all the way up until the draft. And now all of a sudden we're in a sprint to do rookie drafts. And so that's where we're at now, where the rubber meets the road. We're in that sprint.
And it almost feels as though in the midst of the sprint, there are so many things that are changing in rapid fashion, even not just since the draft, but essentially since the analysis of the actual draft. And I feel like there are so many hills that people that were dying on are not dying on nearly as many. And it's been fascinating to watch the reaction, very similar to the actual stock market, the fast reaction of people changing their minds, getting out of spaces, getting into spaces quickly.
Mm-hmm. It goes from, and it's the same thing as the NFL draft, where the NFL lies to you all the way up through, and then during the draft, they have to tell the truth. You hear analysts all the way up through talk about these players and talk about, but once rookie drafts happen, once you're on that clock, you have to make a decision. And so it stops being theoretical and starts being practical. And that's the fun part for me, because in my mind and in my process, it's always practical, because I don't do this. And no offense to anybody in the chat, no offense to anybody listening on the Superflex Super Show or on DLF. I don't do my rookie evaluations for you. That's a great byproduct. And it's awesome. They're at Fantasy Cares, fantasycares.org/campaigns. You can still get them. And that is an amazing byproduct that I've been fortunate enough to be able to donate my rookie work to Fantasy Cares. But I started doing it for me. And my rookie work is still for me. I'm still trying to beat Tommy and John and JMic. I'm still trying to beat these guys in leagues. And I do that with my rookie picks.
Have either of you guys had to abandon any hills yet?
Yes, for me. I mean, define hill, but like I had Ricky White was one of my top 2 or 3 favorite wide receivers to watch in this class. Loved Ricky White's film. He did not go until I think it was the 6th round. It might have been the 7th round. And
It was the 7th.
7th, yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And so not necessarily a hill, because I'm not fortifying these takes. That, like, when we do our rookie evaluation, this comes with a caveat of this is what we see, and we're going to get more information from the NFL, and with the full understanding that if the NFL doesn't take these players in the first 3 rounds, the chances of them being successful dramatically drops. Yep. Because the NFL spends capital, they spend money on players, and that capital and that money drops as the NFL draft goes. Yep. And so if players aren't taken in the first 3 rounds, the first 2 days of the draft, it's a real uphill climb. And so for me to sit there and say, not only do I know better than the NFL, but I can also manipulate the NFL into doing what I want, that's beyond even my ego to try to put out there.
I think I don't know this is a hill either. I'll mention 2 though. One was I was really hopeful that Ollie Gordon would see some positive draft capital. Not even necessarily day 2, but even like early day 3, I would have just been probably smitten a good bit. And I mentioned this on the Hootenanny, but he's one of those players that's similar in the same vein of his fellow alumni Chuba Hubbard and the likes of Braylon Allen, where their second to last season in college was fantastic and they looked great and broke records and looked like guys who you'd want on your fantasy team right now. Then they went back to school, and the final season did not look like the previous seasons where they were ramping up, and the crescendo really took place a little bit early. And so Ollie Gordon, he lands in Miami, which is fun. And obviously that's an offense that theoretically, I'm not sure if it's as potent as it once was, but theoretically you want pieces of. But going in the 6th round, that just doesn't hit the same as what we would have hoped. And I think he really is a microcosm of the running backs in general in this class. And one of the really fascinating pieces for me is that these running backs we were pretty excited about on film, and we thought as prospects, this is a talented bunch, and hey, we could see a ton of guys going in the first 2 days of the draft. And that's going to drastically change the landscape of the running back position at the NFL and in our fantasy game. Well, actually, we saw 6 running backs go in the first 2 days. Meanwhile, we saw double the wide receivers go in the first 2 days. So in a year where we've been trumpeting or many have been trumpeting for the last year plus, it's not the wide receivers this go round. It's the running backs. We all want the running backs. And a lot of the guys that we were excited about to be able to land in positive spaces, not necessarily landing in bad spaces, but not getting the capital that we hoped, it took some of the wind out of the sails of our hopes for early production from this group.
Yeah. What about landing spots? Does that rattle you guys at all? Do you have any that you had to back off of just because of landing spot, or is it just draft capital?
I mean, for me, it's mostly draft capital. Landing spot matters for running backs a lot more to me than wide receiver, because again, and if you are listening and remember the last time I was on the show, or every time I'm on any show, you'll hear me say running backs are an elevator and receivers are an escalator. And so running backs, if somebody goes down, you go and you press that button, you go up to the top floor. And because functionally there's one running back on the field at a time, they're getting the work. Whereas wide receiver, say your wide receiver 1 goes down, it doesn't mean the guy who's sitting on the bench who now comes in is getting all of the wide receiver 1 snaps and looks. It's really a function of talent. And that's the Peter Howard, wide receivers control their targets. And so chances are, if that wide receiver is coming in off the bench, he was not the top talent that's now on the field. And so the targets get allocated a little bit differently. They get spread around. The number 2 guy probably gets a few more. The number 3 guy gets a few more, and so on. And so it's a lot more important to me to see running backs get clear lanes. And I think that a lot of the top backs got that. Not only did they get capital, but they got clear lanes. Genty in Las Vegas, like that should be a great spot, a ton of work. Judkins in Cleveland should be a ton of. You saw Jerome Ford be functional for fantasy football last year, and Quinshon Judkins is a little better than Jerome Ford, at least in my view. Travion Henderson landing with the Patriots, and I know the Patriots backfield has been a headache for us for a long time, but Travion Henderson is a fairly complete back in the fact that he can handle the ball, but also block. So he's going to be on the field a ton for the Patriots, I think. So, and Omarion Hampton lands, and it's a little bit of a muddled backfield there, but a team that wants to run a lot. And he is, I think, the most dynamic runner in that backfield. And so we saw a lot of players land in good situations. The couple that hurt were, and they also didn't get draft capital, but somebody like LaQuint Allen, who was the second back drafted in Jacksonville, so things like that hurt. But I don't know that this wasn't a draft class where I looked at landing spot and I was like, oh, I'm really disappointed at landing spot. It was I'm really confused by how many wide receivers went, and it just felt like, oh, did this guy run a 4.4? Yeah, we're drafting him. Mm-hmm. Oh, did this guy run a 4.4? Yeah, we're drafting him. I'm like, what? Whoa, this is not. Are we in the 0 RB era here in the NFL? Like, what's going on?
And it almost feels like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to belabor this point, but I still find this fascinating. We can move on to whatever y'all want to move on to. But with what Zach talked through, I think one of the other parts of this and the cognitive dissonance of all of this, the running backs didn't get the draft capital that we would have hoped for. Yet, this is the most running backs drafted since like 2019, right? Mm-hmm. So with that, okay, we didn't necessarily get all of the premium landing spots that we maybe would have hoped for. Yet, we got a lot of folks who essentially found themselves in muddled situations that kind of make the water murky for either the incumbents or just for the teams. And even if we talk about Jacksonville, so we're thinking, okay, they've got ETN and obviously Tommy with Duval. Good grief, man. So we got Jacksonville muddying the waters. We go into everything thinking, all right, well, they have ETN, they've got Bigsby, maybe they'll add a guy. Well, they added 2 with the limited capital that they had. Then we turn around and we look at all these guys in the day 3. We've got Cam Scatterboo that now makes the water really muddy in New York, which is like, okay, maybe Tyrone Tracy gets upended here. We've got Woody Marks in Houston, which nobody, I don't know that Zach or myself were excited about. Obviously, you know, he's a pass catcher type of a guy, but for him to be able to go to Houston, it's like, okay, well, what are you all trying to do? And Jarquez Hunter with the LA Rams and Les Snead and his affinity for Auburn and all those weird things. But you literally can go down the line. Jordan James lands in San Francisco. Jaden Blue, really muddy waters in Dallas. Like, who in Dallas is any good at this point? DJ Giddens, who I was really excited about, goes in the 5th round and lands behind Jonathan Taylor. Well, does he have the opportunity to be the number 2? Obviously, he's not taking work from Jonathan Taylor, but we saw Indianapolis take Jonathan Taylor off of the field on 3rd downs. And you literally go down the line and just see a lot of muddy waters, which, at least for me, makes for really fun opportunities when we talk about our rookie drafts and the darts that you'd like to throw to, hey, let me get a piece of this and see if we can strike gold. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we kind of feel like we're monopolizing things, but we kind of talked about this. Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies. I am at Tacit Assassin 13. This is JMic. No, but
finally we're going to learn something on this show.
but we talked a little bit. Talked a little bit about this class and the way even a class like 2017 came in. That 2017 was very obvious at the top. Like you looked at 2017 and you had McCaffrey and you had Dalvin Cook and you had Fournette and you had Joe Mixon. Like that was the most impressive running back class I have ever seen. And then you had Kamara and you had Kareem Hunt, who ended up leading the league in rushing as a rookie. Back in there, we may be back in the zero RB, but that again, I think that's a mistake by the NFL. They should have been doing zero RB the last 3 years.
Yep.
And now we're in a class that I think, but even that 2017 class that was so good, was so easy to identify, came in and had landing spots where Mixon landed in a committee. McCaffrey landed in the committee. Kamara landed in a committee. Kareem Hunt for the first week and a half of the season was in the doghouse, and we weren't sure that Andy Reid was ever going to play him. And then all of a sudden he led the league in rushing. So you kind of had to look at this class and say, okay, yes, this is a good class. It's a deep class. I kept saying it was an asymmetrically good class. It was good at running back. But even with that, you're kind of thinking maybe we're a year or two out from this class really making waves. And now after the draft, I think that's entirely possible. And your listeners are going to be smart enough to know that if somebody doesn't hit this year and we thought they were good, that doesn't mean that they're precluded from hitting next year. And so there's going to be this post-hype sleeper, this secondary window where you're going to end up landing players who are going to be successful. It's the Kyron Williams. I mean, that's where Chuba Hubbard is a great example of that too. Well, there are going to be players who work themselves into successful roles, but it's going to take a little bit of time. I do think the top end of this class, man, they're going to start soon because they got drafted into places where there aren't other players.
JMic, Zac has referred to this class as a Mesa class, and that hasn't necessarily borne out in the way that I'm seeing early ADP setup, right? I think of it almost like an accordion or like a Big Bang class where we're seeing very similarly drafted assets scattered throughout the universe with a lot of space in between. And I'm confused by this, JMic. I don't understand ADP, and I was hoping during this conversation tonight that y'all could help me out with that a little bit, because I'm seeing, you mentioned Cam Scadaboo, somewhere in the 204 range in a lot of super flex leagues that I'm seeing, at least. You go all the way down to the 404, and what are we seeing? We're seeing 4th round drafted running backs. We're seeing, that Big Bang effect where these very similar assets are flung so far out into the universe, but the same ingredients for life are there. And it's just sort of I don't want to say random, but there's a lot of chance that goes into the success of a 4th round running back. Walk me through why this is developing in its current iteration of ADP, whether that's correct, whether there needs to be some compression, or whether this expansion is warranted.
It feels as though, at least with the drafts that I've been into this point, that much of that has to do with the lack of conviction after the first half of the first round. If it's a tight end premium league, you can add the tight ends to it. But even when we get to these first round wide receivers, in the likes of the Emeka Egbuka, the Matthew Golden, the Luther Burden, the names that people have heard, they're we're finding that different people are finding their different pockets, and for whatever reason, and I'm curious of your all's thoughts in this, but there are a ton of names when we think about day 2 wide receivers that people simply aren't comfortable with. And because of the lack of comfortability for that specific group, we're watching players like, and similar to your point, we're watching 4th round, 5th round, and in some instances 6th round running backs, the Jaden Blues of the world, are getting drafted in rookie drafts prior to the likes of a Jalen Noel, prior to the likes of an Isaac Tesla, and who Detroit traded up for. Now, we have no idea necessarily what these teams are going or how they're going to go about trying to leverage these wide receivers. And again, and I think part of it goes into some of our priors that, hey, this wide receiver class, this isn't the year, this isn't the group. We've got a few guys at the top that we're excited about, but no. And I think people are a little bit shook, and the convictions that they came out with in some instances of the latter parts of the class, they all expected these running backs to be so much higher up. And so I don't know if it's an anchoring point or anchoring effect or something of that nature, but there's a lot of that's happening in the midst of saying, do I take Dylan Sampson in the late 2nd when he's now after Quinshawn and he's 4th round? And I think there's a lot of uneasiness that's going into it. So I feel like there are several factors, and I don't know that I landed on a specific point that's going to make you feel better, Tommy. But between the lack of conviction, the craziness that took place with the actual Capitals, and the names not necessarily being the names that people wanted to see in the rounds that we saw them, people are shook right now. And I think we're seeing that all over drafts.
And the wide receivers that did go, especially 3rd round, were not household names. I mean, there are a lot of names that I hadn't heard on podcasts before. You know, when the Patriots take Kyle Williams, like I've seen people say, on Blue Sky, hey, what do you think of Kyle Williams? But it's like a one-off. Or Tesla or Pat Bryant. Like there are guys that went and we're like, what's going on? Like where did this come from to get 3rd round capital? And so I think that there's still some reeling. I still think there are people trying to develop what that, after probably the 205 or 206, what that looks like. And I also think that there are a lot of people who are stuck to those running backs, where the running backs you've heard or the running backs you've seen or the running backs that got hype. So Scadaboo is a great one, Tommy. You mentioned him. He's still going at the top of the 2nd, somewhere between 204, 206. And does his capital and landing spot warrant that? Probably not. He's a 4th round running back. He's a kind of a grinder, a bigger back, not a speed back. He's in New York where they already have a back who was moderately successful last year, being very quick. And so that looks like a thunder lightning committee. But also Scadaboo does a ton through the air, or did a ton through the air. So it's a weird, but he was talked about, and he had a bowl game where he just was incredible. He passed for a touchdown, ran for a touchdown, caught a touchdown. Everybody was talking about him. And so there is anchoring bias is exactly right, JMic, is we get hung up on what happened before or what we thought was going to happen. And then when it doesn't, it's really hard. It's like turning a battleship, it's really hard to turn that in tight quarters. And so that's not turning a bathtub. That was different. He ended up in Green Bay, but
I thought it was a Leonard Fournette joke, but that works.
Oh, come on, John! You set ADP for I don't know how many years now. Let's talk about conviction a little bit. Let's talk about lack of conviction. How can that be manipulated or used to your advantage while this is still forming? You've got all the experience in the world when it comes to rookie ADP. How can the Super Friends take advantage of this opportunity right now?
I mean, I might be the wrong one to ask because I'm turning a battleship myself. And I'm kind of I'm going off a process maybe a little bit too much, where I think that there actually is a little bit of an adjustment to be made away from, not only our priors going into the draft, but some of those processes. I think draft capital, I think probably should be adjusted a little bit this year, particularly with the running back position. Like some of the day 3 guys are probably headed, kind of to J Mike's point earlier, the muddier the waters, kind of the better the opportunity for the rookie. And there's kind of a lot of those right at the moment. So, I think we're going to see some substantial volume for some of these guys a lot sooner than we would normally expect from a day 3 guy. The other one, I'm still really kind of adjusting to the wide receivers, feeling okay about some of these wide receivers. And I think probably the best example I can give you is Emeka Egbuka. Like that felt like such a bad landing spot, right? And I mean, that's kind of one where you want to default back to the process of first round wide receivers. They create their opportunities. It might not happen right away. Jackson Smith-Njigba took a little bit of time, but he got those guys out of the way, and now he's the alpha there and going into year 3. So, we see Chris Godwin in the way playing the same position. We see Mike Evans in the way, Jalen McMillan in the way. All of that gets cleared out for Emeka Egbuka within the next year or 2. And that's something that I was just not prepared for, not prepared to accept as a possibility. I just wanted to write him off because of awful landing spot. But the landing spot conforms to the wide receiver, not the other way around.
And it moves so fast. I mean, 2 years ago, Jackson Smith-Njigba is a perfect example. 2 years ago, DK Metcalf was there. Tyler Lockett was, coming off his 3rd straight year, 5th straight year of being the most underrated wide receiver in fantasy football. Like, it looked like there was no room for JSN to breathe. Fast forward 2 years, Lockett's gone, DK Metcalf's gone, and they're trying to put that back together. Ricky White's there. Don't worry about that; it'll be fine. But like it goes so fast. It is the same thing when AJ Brown was drafted by Tennessee, and there were a lot of people that were tepid on AJ Brown to start with, and then when he went to Tennessee, it was like, no, we don't want him. I was getting AJ Brown consistently in rookie drafts 110 and beyond. AJ Brown.
Yep.
And so
we did that with Justin Jefferson too. He was kind of in that same spot.
Let's not we that. Let's not we that.
I had the privilege of watching J Mike get him basically wherever he wanted him. So now like that's the one benefit of watching the J Mike draft is now we get to call that becomes canon, where those guys got drafted. Jalen Waddle 1st overall, like that happened.
Can I offer a cautionary tale though? Because JSN, I think, is a perfect example of be careful what you wish for. There are things that Tyler Lockett was doing better than JSN last year. Hitch routes, JSN is friggin' horrible at them if you're looking at the underlying metrics. You look at crossers, Tyler Lockett, still better. Go routes, Tyler Lockett, still better last year. The spotlight is going to shine very bright in that Seattle offense on Jackson Smith-Njigba. And I'm not 100% convinced that having that added competition isn't a good thing for the asset, the fantasy asset, JSN. And so once these situations clear out, you don't necessarily have to be proven right. You don't have to take your victory lap. That's when you cash out and you move in a production lateral way in a value gain.
Yep. No, and I agree with you. And also to that point, there is such a player, and I think that JSN is this archetype. There are players who can be a 1 from the 2 in an offense. And I think that predominantly those are guys who play in the slot. So I actually think having DK gone is not a great thing for Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think that having Lockett gone is a good thing from a volume perspective, because Lockett was doing things better than JSN. But not having the guy who's outside, who can stretch the field, who can get over the top of the defense, that poses another set of problems, because if an NFL team can push their safeties up or do something to clog that middle of the field, and you don't have somebody who can stretch the field, and now there are a lot of those, like the Tampa, like the too high zones, where if you don't have somebody who's able to stretch that second level sideline against that zone, man, that middle gets awfully congested, and they can take away things that JSN does. But so I agree with that. It's so funny how, like, all of these processes, all of these theories, they're contingent on other things, and it's never just in a vacuum. We're playing, a set of cards, or a game where the board is always changing, and so you're having to continue to move pieces and continue to attack what's presented, which now we're getting into the psychology, and which is why you end up playing all of the players in your league. You're not actually playing fantasy football. You're playing against all the other managers in your league, and fantasy football that's the game pieces. The players. JSN is a game piece. And he's a real person, and that's something I struggle with too with fantasy football, is how we dehumanize people. But for our game, he's a chess piece. He's a game piece, and we can use the way the value of those game pieces change to manipulate the other managers in our league to build a stronger team and continue on.
Yeah, it's more about the momentum of the grip that other managers have on these assets, and using that momentum against the other managers rather than the assets themselves, right? That's why I think all of us have at times, like, you should build asymmetrical rosters. You should be on the fringes, not because those are inherently better, but because people don't know how to react when they're presented with fringe opposing players, like JMic, I've seen you do this, like in multiple leagues now, where you build in ways that I think start somewhere in the middle, but they start to drift towards the edges in really interesting ways. It's almost like boiling a frog or whatever it is. That's your strategy, at least as I've seen it, in the number of times that I've played against you, where it's like, oh no, what have we done? We don't realize it until JMic has already done this on us, and now we just have to deal with the new reality that we're faced with.
I don't know what you're talking about, Tommy.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
I don't think anybody, it's like the Raptors. I don't think anybody tests the fences better than JMic. He's like, what will you let me get away with? What will you let me? And then as soon as he finds that hole, he's running through it. And the whole pack of Raptors is gone, and your league is going, uh-oh.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond. I will say I find it fascinating in so many instances to push in spaces that people don't necessarily want to or like to go down. And so even in drafts, especially in rookie draft season, like, I'll go into a draft, and typically early on, I'll have a space that I would really like to be in. Obviously, Tommy, Zach, we are in a league together, and in said league last season, and I'm sure everyone wants to hear about our league, but Zach won the title. Zach beat me in the title game, and we have picks. He's got an early pick in this draft, and I am very confident if I don't draft in front of Zach, I know that I'm going to miss out on Quinshon Judkins. He's a player that both of us really like. And I was like, okay, I'm trying. I'm on this walk with this dog as the draft is beginning, and I'm trying. 102, can't get it. 103, can't get it. Okay, 104 is my final shot. If I don't get him now, I know Zac is taking him. And so I think even in the instances when I miss out on spaces or when I miss out on trades, I try my best to allow my biases to be laid down, even in latter parts of drafts, just to be able to do different things. And it's not always glamorous and it doesn't always work to my benefit, but I do try to push in different ways that don't necessarily look like everyone else. And it's not necessarily for the sake of being different. Sometimes it is for the sake of, okay, nobody's doing this thing. Let me just try it. Let me have an experiment. Let me have fun. It could be awesome. It could be terrible. But one way or another, I'm going to have a unique advantage in some way, whether it's with assets, whether it's with picks, whether it's in actual players, to be able to do other fun things with. And so when you push on sore spots, and I think one of the interesting pieces when you think about like not even necessarily a tube of toothpaste, but if you think about a tube of toothpaste, if you squeeze in one spot, you know that it's going to come out somewhere else, right? So typically, if we're trying to get someone to be better at a specific skill at work, if you just talk about the one skill, if you talk, you got to be better at this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Well, then they start trying to circumvent for this thing that maybe they're not great at, and they try to do the other things, and it feels bad because now they're failing in a certain space, and you may not see it because the number that you wanted to see looks really good, but the actual way that they're getting there is terrible. And so when you're able to just squeeze in unique spaces, I think that it allows for you to be able to take unique advantages. So I don't know if that's helpful. But.
Zac, I don't draft rookies. I've made sort of a business out of not drafting rookies over the past 5 or 6 years. Right? And that was my counter move was y'all have fun. I'm going to take the good players that I know are good. And enjoy drafting Mac Jones. See how that works out for you. And there's a lot of hubris in that. It's a lot of fun to look back and say, look at these idiots who messed up. I'm drafting rookies this year. And I think a lot of folks are drafting rookies either because they're new to Dynasty or maybe they've taken the tack that I have and they heard this was a good running back class. They're giving this thing a shot. Do you have any advice for folks who aren't experienced, aren't skilled, don't have sort of the wisdom of navigating a rookie draft? Like this is kind of a unique one as well. Like what should the newbies be looking at as they approach their rookie drafts this year?
I think, first of all, it's important to understand that most of the rookies in any class, not just this one, are going to fail. Like most of the rookies are going to fail. The NFL drafts, 200 and whatever it is, 8 players and or more than that, 240 players. And most of those players don't come in and succeed. And a lot of those players are defensive players that we don't necessarily care about unless you're an IDP player. A lot of them are offensive linemen. The Patriots may take a long snapper just for the heck of it. You never know. But the percentages go down steeply from first round on in terms of whether or not your player, and when we talk about hits, and I wish we would streamline that and kind of have a definition as a fantasy football, like whatever the brain trust is. But like in my mind, I go back to Jacob Rickroad and all of his work with the numbers. A hit was a top 24 season as a running back, a top 24 season as a wide receiver, and a top 12 season as a quarterback, top 12 season as a tight end. You have a 50% chance of hitting that in the first round. And it's markedly better in the first 5 picks than it is below that. And then in the second round, you have a little less than a 25% chance of making those picks. And then you factor in somebody like JJ Zacharyson talking about the NFL draft and how the NFL draft rounds matter to whether or not a player hits. And so if you're taking a player in the second round of your rookie draft who is not taken in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, your percentage of actually having a top 24 season out of those players is very low. But you don't necessarily need a top 24 season out of those players. This is the fun thing about running backs, especially, is you can have running backs who have 4, 5, 6 weeks of top 24, top 10 production because somebody gets hurt and they come in, they're the elevator. Bing, here we go, going up. If Jaden Blue all of a sudden gets 6 weeks in Dallas where he is the back, spending a 3rd round or a 4th round rookie pick, which is a replenishable asset, you get those every year. That's a great pick. That wins you weeks. And so when you talk about hits and misses, you've got to understand what you're talking about and what we're looking for, whether we're looking for a top 24 season, whether we're looking for fill-in weeks, whether we understand that we're building rosters running back heavy, on the bench because you have that ability to plug in. I mean, that's the whole idea of zero RB, which was not actually called zero RB to start with. It's anti-fragility because running backs get injured and you can play running backs who are the back end of a backfield and have success that way. Like there's just so much to rookie drafts with just the numbers without even looking at who's in the class. And then to me, it's really important, and this is kind of why I started doing my own research and my own film evaluation, because it's really important to find people that you trust with evaluations. And so when I first started playing fantasy football, I would read Nick Whalen's Devy Report. I would read the Orange Report. I would listen to all of the content I could on rookie classes. And I would watch a little bit, and I was breaking ties to other people's evaluations and then being really frustrated. So I started doing my own research, piggybacking. I was standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm standing on Nick Whalen's shoulders. I'm standing on the FF Ghost shoulders, guys who do the evaluation, Waldman, all of these really brilliant analysts, but then putting my eye on it and seeing if I could figure out what makes things tick for me and from a fantasy lens, because not everybody evaluates from the same place. And so I think that's probably the other piece, is know who you're listening to and where they're evaluating from, because there are a lot of really smart people who are doing evaluations, much smarter than I am, but they're not necessarily coming at it from the same place. I strictly evaluate for fantasy football. Like I know what I want. It's why in the class, I'm going to bring it back to Lamar Jackson for you, John. I know you love him. I know he's your guy. But in that class, you had Baker Mayfield. You had a couple other quarterbacks who were as highly touted and higher drafted than Lamar Jackson. But Lamar Jackson ran the ball as well as anybody that I have ever evaluated. And he was at least an average thrower coming out of Louisville. And he had progression from his freshman year to his junior year, where he started, instead of his first instinct being running, his first instinct was to look at the next receiver in the progression. When he saw zone coverages, it was, okay, wait that extra blip until a receiver got into the hole in the zone, and then you have a window to throw in. And so that evaluation of Lamar Jackson being, okay, he's my one, Was he the best quarterback coming out? If you were an NFL team, probably not, because the NFL system wasn't designed for Lamar Jackson at that point. But for fantasy, for what we want, man, those legs give such a huge bump. And to me, that's where you get your floor. Like, people talk about the ceiling. Those legs are a floor. Like, you're basically a top 12 quarterback if you can run. And if you can throw it all, you're a top 5. And so it's understanding where people are evaluating from and who you trust to evaluate, and then make your own decisions too. Like, take all that information, aggregate it, and then make a decision. If you want to put eyes on them, put eyes on them. Don't trust me. I'm a dummy. Don't trust me. Like, evaluate it yourself. And if I hear somebody say something different than like my evaluation, especially if they come at it from a metrics point of view, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go back and watch, because I don't see everything.
They should trust you though, and here's why. This is just to kind of piggyback and add to your answer a little bit, because a big mistake that especially new Dynasty players make is really just kind of focusing on the current draft class without the historical context. And we talk about this all the time. What I love about your analysis, Zach, you and Kentley Platt put it in the context of historically, this is what I've been dying to ask you about Ashton Genty, by the way, but it's like, yeah, Ashton Genty compared to the rest of this rookie class is like unreal. And we're also kind of at a little bit of a point just in the NFL player pool where Ashton Genty really does get elevated into, easily top 5 running back status. And you can make an argument for top 3 right now without having set foot on the field. And so it dampens my point a little bit here. It kind of blunts it, but typically, considering these guys in the context of as a prospect, how does this player stack up to previous prospects, not compare them to just this draft class? That's where you kind of get stuck, going a little too hard after some of these players just because of how they look, relative to the rest of the draft class. So that historical context is so damn important. And like I said, you do that. Kentley Platt does that. I don't see a whole lot of that otherwise.
And I think that context is important, class to class, with the way, because so much of this is content driven. When we start talking, we like the Dynasty gods, whatever, the talking heads that have podcasts. When I say we, I mean everybody. It's you guys don't like to talk rookies, so like maybe you are absolved from this, but like, yes, me, I do this, and whoever else you listen to, whether it's the nerds, whether it's Waldman, whether it's Zacharyson, it doesn't matter. Everybody does this, and it's content. And so every year, in order to have people listen to shows, you gotta be excited about it. And so every year the class comes in and you're like, oh, this guy is great. And, this, and without that historical context, every class looks like it's going to be a winner. Every class looks like it's going to have great players in it. And for me, this class does not have a top 25 wide receiver in it since 2017. It doesn't have one. And it is very rare not to have one. As far as running backs, and I won't keep you on Genty any longer. Genty's 6. So I had Saquon Barkley is generational. Saquon Barkley is the best running back that I've ever watched. McCaffrey was 2nd, and I took a lot of flack from McCaffrey. But again, I'm coming from a fantasy perspective. McCaffrey caught the ball. He was a wide receiver out of the backfield. Dalvin Cook was 3rd. Those guys were in the same class. That's wild. Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, and then Genty. And then Darius Geis, but we won't, I'll own, like, I mean, I got Geis, I got Swift, I got Mixon, I got Montgomery, I got Sony Michel. Sony Michel's in there. John Kelly's down there a little bit later, but like I miss just like everybody else, but also historical context. Like it's pretty easy to identify really good players.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to look at a draft and say, okay, this class has incredible players. 2020. CeeDee Lamb is the number one receiver I've looked at since 2017. Justin Jefferson was 2. Give me all of that class. Like any pick I could get into that class, because CeeDee Lamb was going early, and then you had people after Judy, you had people after all the running backs. Man, I had drafts where I could get, CeeDee Lamb at like 103, 104, and then Jefferson at like 108, 109, 110. You just
forever
blew something up. But if you didn't have the historical context on that, it just looks like a wide receiver 1 and a wide receiver 2, and we're breaking ties to running backs, and there we go. Mm-hmm. So for me, having that kind of backlog of, I mean, I can go back and look. I've got these guys all over the place. Just I mean, that's Trevor Lawrence right there. I mean, we could go back. Like I've got the notebooks. I've got all of my plus minus scouting. I can go back and look at them. Somebody asked me if I had this in, everything in a spreadsheet, and I was like, I feel bad because I'm old school. Like I have to write things down. Like I have to pen to paper. And so putting everything back in a spreadsheet is a pain, but I do keep my top 25, because that was Peter Howard keeping me honest. He asked me about that a few years ago, and he's like, these are my top 25. And I was like, all right, I'll do that. And so I went through, and so I keep updating that. It's kind of like Tommy, you kept me honest about the hits. Like, what's my hit rate? Because I was like, I play the way I play, I replenish through the draft. And you were like, well, that doesn't seem very efficient. I was like, I don't know. I have to look. And so I went back through and looked, and I was like, well, it's more efficient than the average, which is a win.
Yeah, just beating ADP is a huge, beating the herd is a huge advantage and really difficult to do. Can we talk quarterbacks for a second, JMic? Because I was thinking about this conversation all day. What is it that we're going to talk about? And I can't help but get stuck on last year's quarterback class and really what it represents. And what I think got lost last year, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's not a fully formed thought, is that it should be more difficult to have a third quarterback drafted in the first round, a fourth quarterback, a sixth quarterback drafted in the first round. The threshold of talent has to almost increase, not stay the same, in order to have an increasing number of NFL teams draft quarterbacks in the first round, because the need goes down. And so these middle tier teams, in theory, shouldn't be seeking out quarterbacks. Should we be giving more credence to the thought that if there is a consolidation of a position in the first round, that those latter players, the third, fourth, fifth player in that position is almost worth more than if there was just 2 or 3 of them, and that second or third player is falling to your 106 or 107 in your rookie drafts. Is that a thought that A, you understand, and B, resonates with you at all?
Do you remember? I'm not sure if you've seen it or not. Hamilton, the play.
I've never seen it. I'm one of the
okay.
Like not seeing Star Wars or something,
Fair enough. So in Hamilton, there's a time where there's almost like a town crier per se, and he's kind of singing this song, and he has this back and forth with Hamilton, and he does "Heed not the rabble who scream revolution." Anyway, he eventually gets to the point of "You're playing a dangerous game," and I think that when we look at the quarterbacks in the first round, I don't know exactly what the threshold is, but if your quarterback, generally speaking, and just in the things that I've looked at since 2019, if they're not going in the first half of the first round, you're playing a dangerous game if you're banking on them doing or being about any kind of fantasy goodness for your teams going forward. And we did the exercise the other day where we were going through day 2 and day 3 quarterbacks, and it gets dark when you look through. And Zach brings up one of the really unique years where the likes of Lamar Jackson, who goes in the back half of the first round as a player that people are excited about. But specifically since 2019, we're looking at Jordan Love being a back half of the first round pick in 2020 that I would say people are excited about. Mac Jones was the latest at the 15th pick, and I think that's probably a threshold that you like to see. But moreover, to your point, if the player is going in the latter half of a first round and it's only like the second or third quarterback, I think you have to be really, really careful in how much stock, whether it be draft positioning or what you're hoping that this player brings to your actual fantasy roster. If you're putting your hope in this person becoming, like, if we're talking about the likes of Jackson Dart,
Yep.
if you're putting your hopes in Jackson Dart, one of the things that's really interesting is we watched Jackson Dart be highly lauded prospect coming out of high school. He goes to USC. He gets with the quarterback whisperer in Lincoln Riley, and he doesn't make it work there. He goes to a second quarterback whisperer, and they have a positive offense. And we've watched all sorts of quarterbacks have positive life when it comes to Lane Kiffin, the likes of Matt Corral, the likes of plenty of dusty quarterbacks that never see the light of NFL locker rooms or NFL days. Jackson Dart doesn't necessarily do anything that special, but all of a sudden he gets this late steam of being someone that, oh, hey, watch out for Jackson Dart. He might go in the first round. And we watch him go to a front office and to a team that is madly desperate, trying to save the likes of their jobs. So now we have Jackson Dart, who, while a highly lauded high school prospect, not exactly being something that's extra special with the likes of a lot of the guys that we saw last season, where Bo Nix, special final season, Michael Penix, special final season, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and the likes of all that group from last season. We didn't see Jackson Dart elevate in that regard. And now he's going into a situation in New York where if they fall on their face for any reason, we're looking at a whole sea change. And now I'm supposed to think that Jackson Dart's going to carry a second coaching regime for the hopes of my fan. Like, I'm just saying, you're playing a dangerous game. If you win big. But if you lose, my question is, why would you do that in the midst of what the landscape of this specific draft is?
Can I devil's advocate that, though?
Of course.
The players that win, that are the atypical, the anomalies, the players who are drafted later who did succeed, are players who succeed with their legs and their arm. And that's something that I think Jackson Dart does, specifically Dart, but like even Nix, his season that he had this past year, he is a much more mobile quarterback than what we think of as a traditional NFL quarterback. And if you go and even if you look at the NFL, the top, so if you fantasy points the top quarterbacks, right? So that, because that's what we're playing. It was something like 10 out of the 12 were what I would consider a running quarterback, ran for more than 300 or whatever it was, 350. I don't have the specific numbers on me, and it was a while that I looked it up. But it's that running ability that gives you the ability to be an outlier as one of those back-end quarterbacks. It's Lamar Jackson was one. Hurts was one. Like, the guys who succeed from back there do something differently than stand in the pocket and be a statue. And I think that's something that I've gone so far away from, not only in rookie drafts, but when I do startup or when I'm making trades, I generally stay away from quarterbacks who don't run. And we had this conversation when we talked about Shedeur Sanders, JMic, on our Shedeur Burrow episode, where the pinnacle of the statue quarterback is Joe Burrow now. Like, that's as high as it gets, and he is incredible. But most of those stationary quarterbacks, their ceiling is quarterback 10, 12. I mean, I know you saw Stroud come out and have a great rookie year, and he was, but his fantasy finish was okay. But in the mind of Dynasty, he was the quarterback 5 or 6, and then, you were disappointed last year when it didn't, he didn't elevate to that. And so it's, yes, you're playing a dangerous game. They don't hit often. And I think, JMic, that it was even top 10. I think it was 10. His quarterbacks drafted in the top 10 had a much higher hit rate than everybody else. And if you look outside of the first round, it's like a 7% since Tom Brady was drafted. Like, it's very, very few, because there are a lot of quarterbacks drafted. But in Superflex, hitting on a quarterback is worth throwing a second round pick at them. Like, it just is. Like, if you nail a quarterback with a second round pick, or even a late first, because again, they're replenishable assets, and if you have the 112 or 111, you're a competitive team. So you're probably not a quarterback away. So if you can take that pick and throw it out and get a quarterback, and now all of a sudden you've just reloaded, that's a win.
This is what I mean, though, about, us like recalibrating, kind of what we're looking for, and defaulting back to like what we know, like defaulting to history repeating, right? Like, because we know that JMic's right. The second half of the first round is typically a wasteland. Like, it happens from time to time. But for the most part, like, the probabilities say Jackson Dart probably doesn't hit. And, so like, you can start there and then just kind of build your case and see if it pulls you close enough to center that you can justify the pick. But like, Tommy and I, we just jumped straight to Jackson Dart belongs in the, around 104, kind of in a tier with Cam Ward even. And, I think that I kind of hate the term hopium, but like, there's a little too much of that going on. I think there's a lot of, he's going to be thrown to Malik Neighbors. He's got Brian Dable, who is the one who miraculously turned Josh Allen into something. So, like, you start telling yourself this story, but, I think that it really needs to start with the default of, okay, probabilities say that this is not a thing. Now, here's how it could happen. But again, like, let's make some safe bets here.
Jackson Dart feels like one of the really critical parts of this rookie class, though. Like, if we have general apathy towards most of these wide receivers, if we have a bit of a downturn in our expectation versus the reality of draft capital for the running backs, we're really left with two choices then, aren't we? Jackson Dart or tight ends. Right. And what are you going to do there? I'm going to take the position that really can, like, shake up a league, which is quarterback. Unless you're in a very heavy tight end premium, the wins above replacement, the accessibility in the trading market, the ability to starve others out, the ability to turn a rebuilder into a contender quickly, all runs through the quarterback, at least in the way that I build teams. And this is where the real challenge is, in my opinion, is not necessarily Jackson Dart. Like, I think the outcome of Jackson Dart really matters. It's everything surrounding him that is just underwhelming, which pushes him up. And I think that the market at large isn't respecting that first round capital. Like, it does mean something to be drafted in the first round as a quarterback.
I am apathetic to quarterbacks at best. And I know we've had this conversation where,
except for Lamar Jackson, you are not apathetic towards him for some reason.
But again, you could get him in the second round at that point. Like, it was beautiful because everyone was talking about him being a running back or a wide receiver, and Polian wanted him to run at the combine as a wide receiver. Like, it's a cost benefit analysis, and even on the teams that I acquired Mahomes, he was not the guy in that class. People were looking at him and they're like, he's a gunslinger and he throws the ball all around. And me as a quarterback agnostic, unless you're one of the top 5 quarterbacks that have that real rushing upside, I'm probably shrugging at you. I have Jackson Dart at 8, and I will take him at 8. And Tommy and JMic, that I'll take him at 8, because when I was on the clock at 8, that was the pick that I took in Olympians. And I'm not unhappy taking Dart at 8. And I JMic, I see you saying you'd rather draft Milroe than Dart at ADP. And I agree, because I don't think that there's very much to choose between Dart and Milroe. But again, there's the rushing upside with both of them, and probably even a little bit more with Milroe, although you've got a little bit more work to do in terms of processing and assessing a play and making a decision with it. But those are both players who are mobile enough that I want to be in on Cam Ward. I don't think there's enough mobility for me to be really excited about him. Which, again, if you 3,000-foot view this rookie class, I don't think this is a great quarterback class. Right. This quarterback class wouldn't have rated last year. So,
and I think that's a very, very important point that shouldn't be lost in all of this, is especially the question that you all asked Zach earlier about the context of over the years, the scouting over time. And Tommy, you bring up a very astute point when thinking through, all right, if we're apathetic to the rest of this class, then it's probably not a terrible idea to be able to say, okay, let me lean into the first round capital of Jackson Dart. And I think that another dangerous game that we often play is thinking that we have a very good handle of the infrastructure of the organization and how well that's going to support someone or how fragile that it is. And I think the only rebut that I would have to what you said, Tommy, in terms of what your options are between the tight end or the quarterback, what if I told you didn't have to draft any of them? What if we take the spot, we trade and get a future first and maybe a little bit of sprinkling on it, and we re-rack it for a year that maybe excites us just a tad bit more, gets our juices flowing and feel it down my palms. So, like, can we get a year where we get a first and we're excited about that? Perhaps can we re-rack it?
Be smooth, man. I feel my heart fluttering in my chest. The problem with that, though, is we're thinking logically. We're thinking in logical terms in regulated markets, and that's just not a space that we're currently in. The dynasty space is an unregulated market that is really only tethered to the veto process and whichever trade calculator you're willing to not be embarrassed by,
I'm always willing to be embarrassed. But I think that's the beauty of, and now here again, we're back to psychology. We're back to playing your league mates, because that's where the market's set. Because there is no regulating body. Every single league is its own ecosystem. Every single league is its own market. and if your league has a Russ Fisher, who knows what the market looks like, because sometimes he gets bored and will make a trade, and you're like, what just happened? How did that, and so and it's funny, JMic and I have had this conversation. I don't mean to talk out of school, but like several times with this league specifically, and there are a lot of really sharp people in this league. It's sometimes hard to trade in Olympians, and you get this bias of the players on my team, or somebody else will be like, the players on my team are more valuable than what you think, or you look at a team and you're like, well, what direction are you going? And the obvious answer is down, like you need to rebuild, but that's not the direction that someone is going. And so it's such an interesting piece to try to figure out league to league. It's one of my favorite things. I keep notebooks on league mates too. And that was a Leo Pasiga thing. When I first started playing Dynasty, I did a lot of reading with DLF and a lot of listening to podcasts. And every time Leo Pasiga would come on a podcast, he said, you have to keep track of what your league mates do, because eventually they'll show you patterns, and those you're going to be able to exploit. And whether or not you can always exploit them, I mean, it kind of depends on a lot of factors, but man, it's made for some really great trade partners. If I know often what you're looking for, I can give you that. And then all of a sudden we're not haggling. We're not frustrated with each other. We're not, I don't snap decline your offer, because, you kind of know what I'm looking for. I kind of know what you're looking for, and things happen. So it's so interesting league to league to league to league to watch things play out.
Just like rookies, though, I'm leaving more room as I play Dynasty over time for growth within myself and within my league mates. Let's do a little bit of foreshadowing here. I'm working on a project. It's very early on, about the growth of people and how they change over time and how they don't, right? And how externalities and internal factors can really change our decision-making process. And we need to leave room for that as well. If you do write the notebook, see if the trend line is moving in a certain direction as well, because that tends to happen, whether, of course, the obvious factors like rebuilding, contention, luck, reinforcing bias, those types of things, but just the natural human growth. A lot of people who play fantasy football start out in their teens. They stay in fantasy football because, they're playing with their college buddies or whatever. And then we grow and we become parents. We lock into careers. And that's a different phase of life. It's like fundamentally different to our development. And as we age and become wise and become less wise and have midlife crises and all sorts of stuff, divorce, whatever, that affects who we are internally. And I think that there's a lot of space for people to not be that stagnant notation in a notebook,
Oh, absolutely. But it's always always growing. It's everything that happens. And to be able to, again, see, and you're talking larger growth than what I am, but to see people jump on zero RB, or see people shift strategy, or see people, you can almost see when they shift who they're listening to for podcasts. It's so interesting to me as somebody who is first and foremost an observer of people. It's so fascinating to me to watch that work, and then be able to use it to my advantage to, clean up in rookie drafts. Yeah.
John, we've held these two fine gentlemen for over an hour now. Do you have any final thoughts or questions before we let them go?
Oh God. I could talk to this collection of minds for hours. So yeah, like we're gonna leave stuff on the table. That's just the way this goes. Hopefully, though, we can use it as bait to drag them back before the season starts. That would be my dream. So yeah, I think it's better to burn out than to fade away. And maybe that's what we should do here. So let's wrap this one up for the week. But before we get there, JMic, Zac, just thank you guys so much for your time. Like I said, we got to do this again very soon. And above all else, man, it's just like so good to see both of your faces. I've been saying for months now, when I see JMic for the first time in like years, like it was going to bring a tear to my eye, and it did. And then like it's always just my favorite episode of the year when we get Zac on here. So to add JMic to that is just like, this is just dream stuff right here. So don't want to wake up. Nobody pinch me. But thank you guys.
Kind of like a big family reunion, and I love it.
It is. Yeah. And at the perfect time. I mean, self-care week, you know, that's it. This is what we needed. It needed a little self-care, some time with the family here. So yeah, thank you guys for being here. Really, really appreciate it and love you both. Let's wrap this one up for the weekend. As we do that, ask you for a quick favor. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also subscribe to the DLF family of podcasts mega feed. Get access to all the great podcasts from dynastyleaguefootball.com, including the Super Show. But once you've subscribed to the Super Show specifically, it's a huge favor to us if you would rate and review. This helps us to get out to more people, involve more people in the conversation. We can really drill down to the topics that are the most useful to you, our super friends. You can get at me on Twitter. I'm at Superflex Dude. We're both on Blue Sky. I'm at Superflex Dude. He's at FF Tommy B. JMic at JMic Check. Twitter, Blue Sky, both.
Yeah, both. Big old bag of both.
Nice. Zac, I believe, is also on both at Tacit Assassin 13.
I am XX. I'm only on Blue Sky now, but yeah.
Nice. So. Okay. All right. There you go. Yeah. That's where you can get at this team. So yeah. This episode was dedicated in loving memory to James the Brain Catullus. Thank you to dynastyleaguefootball.com for the platform. Thank you to Heart and Soul Radio for the music. Thank you to the Dynasty Dummies for their time. And above all else, thank you for listening. And until next week, stay sexy and super flexy.